All right, if you're like me, you're probably awaiting Apple's next event. We didn't get the November event. We are now sitting here in December, and there's still a lot of Apple products that were supposed to be updated before the end of this year. So you're probably wondering, when is the next event? Well, I guess you're not wondering, right? You read the title before you clicked on the video, and you know that this video is all about Apple's March event. Yes, we are expecting Apple to have a new event at their usual spring timeframe, which is most likely going to take place in March. And at that event, we are going to probably see a lot of new Macs, to the point where I am dubbing this event Mac March Madness. It's going to be Mac March Madness with all the Macs that Apple is going to be releasing during that time frame. And I don't think we're going to see really any other Apple products at this event besides new Macs. And yes, there are a lot of them. Now, why am I saying there's definitely going to be new Macs at this event? Well, I think that has to do with some really recent leaks in regard to M2 Max chips in Geekbench scores. So these leaks for the M2 Max chip are pretty compelling. We are seeing a leak for the single core score for 2027, which is higher than the single core score benchmark of the regular M2 chip. I don't know if that has to do with more advanced cooling or if these M2 Max chips are actually built on a different process that would enable them to get even higher single core performance. Now, another important takeaway from this leak is the multi-core score. We are seeing a score here of 14,888. And that sounds exactly what the M2 Max should be, right? It is a big improvement, not only in single core performance, but in multi-core performance as well. But there are some other interesting takeaways that we can learn from this benchmark. If you actually look at the details of this benchmark, you can see just how many processor cores this M2 Max chip is going to have. So you can see that it actually says 12 CPU cores. So that is an upgrade over the M1 Pro and M1 Max with their 10-core CPU designs. And then perhaps even more interestingly is the max memory on this model. If you take a look, you can see that the memory listed here is for 96 gigabytes of memory. That is very, very interesting. That is the most memory ever that has been on a Mac laptop. And that means that Apple is doing exactly what they did with the base level M2 chip, where they expanded the maximum memory that you could get on those machines from 16 gigabytes to 24 gigabytes, and they are ramping that, it seems, across the entire M2 chip lineup. So that means we can learn not only what's going to be on this M2 Max chip. The Max memory is probably going to be 96 gigabytes up from 64 gigabytes. That's a pretty nice increase if you're getting a higher end MacBook. But you can also learn that on the lower end M2 Pro chip, we are probably going to see the machines move up from 32 gigabytes of max memory to 48 gigabytes of max memory on those machines. And then we can learn even more probably about the higher end chips above that. Of course, I am talking about the M2 Ultra chip. Now, if you know anything about how the Ultra chips are made, it's basically made by gluing two of the Max chips together. So the M1 Ultra is two M1 Max glued together. The M1 Max can go up to 64 gigabytes of memory. You double that. The max configuration for the M1 Ultra is 128 gigabytes memory. So we do the same math here. We take two of the M2 Max chips, we glue them together, we do 96 times 2, and we are going to come out with 192. We're going to get 192 gigabytes of max memory. I knew the mental math. I know what 96 times 2 is. I didn't have to use a calculator. It also means that that M2 Ultra chip is going to have a 24-core CPU compared to the Max 20-core CPU, because again, it's two of those chips glued together. So you do 12 times 2, it's going to be 24 CPU cores. So sorry to go off on that tangent there, but there's a lot we can learn about the next generation of M2 chips, all from just this single M2 Max chip leak. We basically have the specs laid out for us now. But let's talk about the machines themselves. What machines are going to be updated? Well, I kind of said that already too, right? So for this March event, I would say we are going to get an update to the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro, with the big update being just these chips. And I think that's what we can expect. These are going to be spec bump updates, probably across the board, with a few notable exceptions. So for the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro, you're going to get the M2 Pro and the M2 Max chip with the specifications I just listed. That's why I put it at the beginning of this video, because that's the big update. I don't think we're going to get anything new in terms of design. I don't think we're going to get new ports. I don't think we're going to get a new display. The mini LED display is already so great. I don't think we're going to get new speakers. We're not going to get a new webcam. Like, this is what we got. and the current laptops are good. Maybe some sort of small update that I'm not thinking of, but for the most part, expect the major feature for this update to be a spec bump. And I think that's the same we can say about newer computers like the Mac Studio. I expect the Mac Studio to be at this March event if we're already getting leaks of the Max chip. And what is that Mac Studio going to look like? It's going to look exactly the same as the current Mac Studio. And the big update to it is probably going to be that you're going to be able to configure it with an M2 Max chip and then an M2 Ultra chip with the higher end configurations. But there are more Macs coming that may be a little bit more exciting. So I think on the lower end, we're gonna be expecting updates for the 24-inch iMac and also the M1 Mac Mini. Now again, the 24-inch iMac is probably a device that's not going to be that well updated. I think it's just going to be a spec bump again. Like, I don't think we just got a new redesign. We got all the colors. Maybe there'll be some new colors for this new revision of the 24-inch iMac. But I think the general design's obviously going to stay the same. The last iMac design stayed with us forever. And we're just going to replace that M1 chip, put an M2 chip in it. Like, the only thing I can think that maybe Apple would do is maybe they'll put the center stage camera on the 24-inch iMac. But they kind of got some blowback putting that in the Mac Studio because it wasn't necessarily that good of a camera quality-wise compared to the regular 1080p webcam that's on the iMac already. So I'm not even sure if they'll do that. I'm not even sure if they'll do that. So I think, again, 24-inch iMac, it's going to be a spec bump. The M1 Mac Mini, again, a spec bump. So it's going to take the M1 chip and it's going to put an M2 chip in there. And I don't think, at least for this base level Mac Mini, that we can expect anything too exciting for that design. Now, where we can expect something a little bit more exciting with these Mac updates has to do with a higher end version of the Mac Mini. If you go on Apple's website, you'll see that they still sell the Intel Mac Mini. Why do they sell the Intel Mac Mini? I say this every time I bring it up in a video. I don't know. It looks like a really bad value to me, but what is being rumored right now is that Apple is actually working on a higher end version of the M1 Mac Mini. And this would basically be an M2 Pro Mac Mini. Now, there are some rumors saying that the M2 Pro Mac Mini might get some sort of redesign. It might be kind of flatter. Maybe it'll have like a plexiglass top. Who knows? It's really not important because it's a Mac Mini desktop. The looks really don't matter too much. And I think the overall profile and shape of that computer are going to stay kind of the same based on what the Mac Studio looks like, which is basically looks like a souped up Mac Mini. Maybe that M2 Pro version will borrow some of like the back design of the Mac Studio. So maybe it'll have like vents in the back with all the holes, like just like the Mac Studio has, to get just really efficient cooling out of it. But the big upgrade here is it's going to be the M2 Pro chip in a Mac Mini. And that's actually really good because you're going to have a system where you can upgrade that Mac Mini to a much more performative computer, but still at a pretty cheap price point. Like, this is going to be like around $1,000, and it's going to come with the M2 Pro chip, probably with 512 gigabytes of storage and 16 gigabytes of memory as standard. What about other Macs though, right? Like, we're going through the list here, and there's a lot. We already covered the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro, the Mac Studio, a new M2 iMac, a Mac Mini, and then another version. Is that like 7 new Macs? Is there going to be another one? Maybe. And that has to do with finally, the Apple Silicon M2 Extreme Mac Pro. All right, so this one has been rumored for a while. This is basically Apple's replacement for the Mac Pro. They kind of pre-announced this already when they announced the Mac Studio. They said the Mac Studio is like a great addition to their lineup, and we still have one Mac left to transition before we finish the transition over to Apple Silicon, and they name dropped the Mac Pro. So we don't know. Like, this might actually be the most exciting Mac because we don't know a lot about it. There's a lot of rumors floating around. Who knows if they're true? But basically, we are expecting a desktop tower very similar to what we have on the current Intel Mac Pro. And there is an expectation that there will be some sort of expandability with the M2 Extreme version of this Mac Pro. So how much expandability is that? Does that mean that we can replace graphics cards? Can we replace storage? Can we actually go in and add more RAM? Is that gonna be something that we can break up from these traditional Apple Silicon Macs where they just have the unified memory? There's a lot of open questions right now, and I don't think anyone truly has the answer. If you're to ask me, I think that there will be some form of expandability. but I think it'll be quite limited. I don't think we'll be able to add video cards into that Mac Pro. I just think it's not going to work with the Apple Silicon architecture. There's going to be an M2 Extreme chip. It's going to have a bunch of GPU cores in it. I think like some of the estimates were like 128 GPU cores, maybe more at this point based on some of these leaks. But yeah, a lot of GPU cores. So maybe that'll be powerful enough for most people. And then, so you won't be able to add video cards. But then stuff like storage, I feel like is pretty easy to figure out. So I think there will be some sort of way to add storage, whether that's third-party storage, or maybe you just have to buy it directly through Apple or trusted third-party partners. And then memory. I think there's probably a good chance that you'll be able to configure memory into it as well. I know the Apple Silicon architecture is very tightly integrated with unified memory, but again, I feel like there is a way that Apple could add memory. And then if you look at the current Intel Mac Pro, you can max that out all the way to 1.5 terabytes of memory. So I kind of feel like Apple wouldn't want to replace their, that version with the Mac Pro with something that couldn't be spec'd as high as that Mac Pro, the Intel version. So I think there's a good chance that at least for expandability, there will be slots for storage and memory. I just don't know if that'll be in the traditional sense. Yeah, that's what I kind of expect out of the Mac Pro. And I guess you can learn a bit about the M2 Extreme chip. It's at least going to have 384 gigabytes of unified memory. The CPU on that is probably going to be a 48-core CPU. And it just sounds like a really powerful machine. I'm very curious to see what it's actually going to look like. And I'm kind of curious to see if it's actually going to be at this Apple March event. And if Apple's actually going to announce all those Macs at one event. Again, it's going to be Mac madness for that event. But let me know in the comments below, what Mac are you most excited for this rumored Apple March event? And do you plan on buying any of them? As always, if you found this video helpful, consider leaving me a like. If you want to see more from the channel, if you want to see my reaction to this event in, I guess it's over 3 months, so I'll see you for the reaction in 3 months. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Or maybe not. Maybe I won't. Maybe I won't see you until 3 months. Take care, everyone.